number 10, we have Superboy from Superboy Annual 1996. In a distant future, the Superboy mantle is taken up by a being named Quetzal, who comes from the planet Aztlan. And instead of the classic origin story, this future world gives the title of Superman to those selected as champions by the god Quetzalcoatl, which is basically a giant flying snake that seems to be based on an ancient religious text from Aztec culture, but that's just how Superman gets his name. Superboy is the apprentice to that champion known as Superman in this storyline. He's pretty short-lived, naturally only lasting the one annual issue, but he's got a cool new costume design and has a different cultural background than the Superboy we're used to, which is interesting to see. At number 9, we have Superman from Superman Man of Steel Annual 1996. Side note, in case you didn't already know, there was a crossover spanning through all of the DC annuals in 1996 called Legends of Dead Earth, which framed DC stories in a dystopian future. So it was a good year for a list like this. Regardless, in this future, a future version of Lex Luthor is leader of the Galactic Empire and is systematically destroying all planets that show potential to foster the birth of new Supermen. But as he's preparing to destroy a planet called Hydros, a rebel force sneaks onto the planet and saves its only remaining survivor, Caleb. Once he leaves the planet, he's able to absorb the radiation from a nearby star and becomes the new Superman of that time. At number 8, we have All-Star Superman. Now, this Superman is part of a completely different continuation of that which comic book fans have been following. Known to generally take place around the pre-crisis continuity, this alternate continuation goes on into a distant future during the course of the 12-issue maxi series. And it follows the adventure of a Superman who is facing death at the hands of Lex Luthor, who gives him a fatal dose of solar radiation. And with his remaining time in existence, he decides to carry out a number of tasks, including creating Earth Q, which refers to the real timeline that we're used to, and repairing the sun as well, which he does by flying right into it, sacrificing himself in the process. This version of the hero is back to basics. He comes off as very simple and relaxed in his demeanor, without the burdens of past traumatic adventures from the current timeline. At number 7 is the Superman from Last Night on Earth. In this Elseworld future, the world is in a very dark place as a result of global warming, and Lex Luthor and Superman are debating over good and evil, with a very brutal consequence on the line for the losing party: getting impaled by kryptonite. And the judges who choose the winner? All of humanity, of course. And although it appears that Superman has won the debate by the end, humanity chooses to impale Superman instead of Lex Luthor, leaving him, well, dead. The following events take place as a result of his death and is largely considered more of a Batman storyline, but for a time there we catch a glimpse of yet another futuristic version of Superman, one who chooses to use his words over his fists, I guess. At number 6, we have Mon-El, aka Lar Grand, from the Legion of Superheroes. This guy is sort of veering towards being a knockoff version of Superman, since he's known to be a superhero inspired by Superboy, who is himself already a copy of Superman in a way. Either way, this futuristic version of the hero is actually vulnerable to lead instead of kryptonite, and is sent to the Phantom Zone by Superboy when he's fatally poisoned. A lot of Superman being poisoned in this list, I'm realizing. Future's not so bright. Either way, he's put into the Phantom Zone for his own protection, but when a 30th century version of Brainiac, Brainiac 5, finds a cure to his poisoning, Mon-El returns and becomes a member of the Legion of Superheroes, and actually takes Superboy's place in his future timeline. At number 5, we have Superman from the House of El Future State storyline. This version of the hero has the exact same backstory that we're used to, being the last son of Krypton, all that jazz. But in this continuation, Superman is captured and has his powers stripped after being stabbed with kryptonite. He's then trapped by Mongol in one of his war worlds and forced to fight in a gladiatorial arena. Every time he dies, Mongol brings him back to life and forces him to fight again. Meanwhile, in the 30th century, a group of Superman's descendants create a new version of the House of El and rule over the cosmos, believing Superman has always been nothing but a myth. It's sort of a sad story in reality, but don't worry, Superman does make a comeback in the end after his time as a gladiator. At number 4, we have the Superman from Superman vs. Terminator. This one is pretty self-explanatory, and it's not considered to be an official part of the DC canon as you can imagine. But it's still one of the cooler iterations of Superman, all things considered. Created by Alan Grant and Steve Pugh over at Dark Horse Comics, Superman vs. the Terminator: Death to the Future is just a fun read. When Skynet sends Terminators to find a young man named Connor in Metropolis, they're met with resistance they don't quite expect when none other than Superman shows up. The art style and storytelling matches up pretty darn well with the DC Comics if you ask me, and I just felt like this version of the hero needed some love due to how unique his circumstances are. At number 3 we have 6th Dimension Superman. Living in what appears to be a more advanced future, we're introduced to an older Justice League that's initially thought to be the Prime Earth Justice League, which seems plausible at first due to the way that they're dressed among a few other things, but eventually we realize that it's just a futuristic version of the current Justice League. And with the team still being led by Superman, we assume that they've been continuing on with their typical crime-fighting business, but there's another twist that's soon revealed, which is that Superman is actually World Forger masquerading as the Kryptonian. The real future Superman's whereabouts are unknown at the time, but World Forger looks and acts just like the real Superman, so I felt that he belonged on the list. Okay fine, I mainly included him because of his cool costume design, but even in his short 10-issue run during Justice League Volume 4, he appears to be about as powerful as an aging, more wise, and practiced Superman might be. At number 2 we have Justice Lord Superman from Justice League Beyond. In this alternate future, Lex Luthor is President of the United States and Superman is, at first, pretty much the same as the one we know. But when President Luthor executes the Flash, Superman storms the White House and confronts him. But after Luthor delivers this manipulative speech saying Superman has helped him become evil and is a big important counterpart to all his evil deeds, Superman is pushed over the edge and executes the president. This comes as a shock to Superman's allies, but it sets a new precedent for this futuristic team known as the Justice Lords. And moving forward, Justice Lord Superman continues to deal with criminals by lobotomizing them with his laser vision. This storyline actually feels like a combination between Injustice and The Dark Knight Rises, in that there's a morally questionable team being led by a twisted version of Superman, and then Batman decides he needs to stand up against Superman's destructive ways, except in this case, it all happens sometime in the distant future, fitting it nicely at the top of this list. At number 1 we have John Kent from Future State. This is a fun one. A younger version of the hero who is the offspring of Superman and Lois Lane. The Future State event was released in 2021 and looked at what a potential future for the DC universe would and could look like. And alongside a handful of other new characters taking on the mantles of notable DC heroes, John Kent takes on the Superman mantle. There isn't much known about him quite yet, but at first glance he appears to have a more personal disposition. Possibly his half-human heritage gives him a bit more of an approachable energy, almost like Invincible. I'm looking forward to seeing how far John Kent goes in the comics and how they will develop a canonized story of how he ends up taking over for his father in the long run.
Number 10. Legends of the Dead Earth. In Legends of the Dead Earth, the surviving human population of Earth are all basically aboard a spaceship, which drifts kinda aimlessly through space as it's lost its heading. The humans have also been on the spaceship so long, they basically forgot there's even a world outside. However, Batman rises up among them to become a hero and help them once again find their way. This Batman is not the Batman, Bruce Wayne, but instead a well-meaning citizen on the spaceship who learns the truth about how they are basically lost. He takes up the mantle of the hero from old folklore known as Batman and inspires a girl aboard the ship named Tris Plover to help him in his fight to fix the ship's navigation system. It's actually a really depressing story though, because in the end she's like, man, I'm not gonna be alive to get to this planet. What's the point of anything? Number 9. Saint Batman. Saint Batman was the name Azrael took up in one of the Dark Multiverse alternate realities. Here, Azrael had taken up the cape and cowl in Batman's stead after his back was broken by Bane, but refused to give back the mantle, and instead of Batman defeating Jean-Paul and taking the mantle back, Azrael basically won that fight, keeping it. He turned Bruce into a shadow of his former self, removing all his limbs and keeping him alive through kind of a cybernetic life support thing, which also seemed to cause Bruce extreme pain. Years later, Bruce is saved by the son of Talia al Ghul and Bane. However, it turns out in rescuing Batman and later defeating Azrael, they really just swapped out one awful tyrant for an even worse one. And friends, before we head on to the next point, if you are loving this list, we would love if you headed over to our Facebook page and gave it a like and a follow. It really does help us out over here at YouTube, so thank you! Number 6. Jace Fox. Jace becomes Batman in the possible future we get a glimpse into through DC's Future State event. In this event, Jace Fox, also known as Tim Fox, one of the children of Batman's ally Lucius Fox, ends up becoming Batman in a cyberpunk dystopian future where Gotham has become a police state. Jace is a mysterious figure but stumbles upon Batman's tech and decides to try and use it to do some good, despite the fact that at this point all masks are outlawed in Gotham. Jace Fox keeps his vigilante deeds and persona a secret from the rest of the Fox family. Many of his combat skills come from his life as a mercenary and from Katana, who he was once a protege of. Number 7. Justice League of Assassins. In the alternate future reality of Earth 14, the JLA is a little bit different. Instead of being the Justice League of America, they are known as the Justice League of Assassins, which still perfectly fits that same acronym, so yay. JLA. Like in the main reality, Batman also ends up joining this team. The world they live in seems to be a post-apocalyptic war zone when we see the JLA in issue number 15 of the 2016 Superman series. Despite their most valiant efforts, the Justice League of Assassins, including Batman, end up defeated and killed by the Prophecy. Batman actually ends up losing his head as a result of this fight. He's like the first one to go. Gets his head shot clean off. At least he still gets to finish what he was saying though. As his head pops off. Number 6. Helena Wayne. In the alternate future reality of Earth 2, it is Helena Wayne, Batman and Catwoman's daughter, who lives on to carry on the Batman legacy. Helena Wayne is often known by the name Huntress, not to be confused with Helena Bertinelli, the Huntress of the main continuity, but eventually goes on to take up her father's mantle of Batman. Yeah, not Batwoman, just Batman. Kinda love it. We haven't gotten to see too much of Helena's Batman in action, but I have always loved the idea of Catwoman and Batman settling down together and having a daughter who would one day be inspired to carry on their legacy and become a hero using either of their superhero names in their honor. Number 5. Dark Knight Returns. This is an older version of Bruce from Frank Miller's alternate future reality of Earth 31. Here Batman comes out of retirement when Harvey Dent returns. To make matters worse, the Joker also escapes custody. Not only does Batman have Dent, the Joker, and the criminal scum of Gotham to contend with, but Superman is also after him as well. In this reality, Superman had become a government hero, becoming the loyal ally to the President of the United States. Kind of like his guard dog, really. And the President of the United States does not take too kindly to Batman's return. In the end, the two must face off in a famous fight that would go on to inspire multiple narratives, including the Batman v Superman film from the DCEU. Number 4. Damian Wayne. One of the darkest Batmen to arise would be Damian Wayne's Batman. Damian takes up the cape and cowl in a possible future story featured in Batman issue 666. Get it? 666. Known as Batman in Bethlehem. Batman in Bethlehem is a story where in the future, Damian Wayne sells his soul to Satan in order to ensure Gotham's protection. This drastic measure happens in a world where people really are looking for some kind of security as climate change, war, and acts of terror threaten the entire planet, turning it into a hellish futuristic landscape. This future version of Damian, who becomes Batman, also seems to be impervious to gunfire and no longer restrains himself from killing those who oppose him. Kinda like my dad was here so that I could be this Batman later. I feel like Daddy Batman would not be too happy with you, Damian. He would be like, don't kill people, but you're gonna do what you're gonna do. I guess it's a different world. Number 3. Thomas Wayne. Although it might seem weird to put Thomas Wayne on this list as he's Batman's father and so in a way is part of his past, in the alternate future known as Flashpoint, Thomas actually becomes Batman instead of Bruce. This is after Bruce is killed, causing Thomas to make a plan to get vengeance and inspiring him to become a vigilante fighting for justice on the streets of Gotham. Martha, however, kinda goes the opposite way with it. The death of Bruce causes her to basically go insane. Unable to move on or let go, she ends up haunted by his memory and becomes the villain known as the Joker, becoming Thomas's sworn nemesis, despite the love that they once shared. What a tragic story. Number 2. Dick Grayson. Helena isn't the only one to carry on Batman and Catwoman's legacy on Earth 2. Let's not forget that before Helena was born, Batman had an adoptive son in the boy wonder known as Robin, aka Dick Grayson, often known as the original Robin across many different worlds. On Earth 2, Dick Grayson would end up taking his adoptive father's mantle before Helena did and operate as Batman for a time. He settles down with Barbara Gordon and the two even have a son together who they name John. Dick, however, loses the use of his legs when he becomes paralyzed by the Joker shooting him through the stomach, which damages his spine. Sound familiar? Dick would later become Oracle. In this reality, Barbara ends up as a cop who gets shot and dies while attempting to help her family flee Darkseid's invasion. Their son John grows up to become his Aunt Helena's sidekick Robin. Super cute. I like it. Not Babs' death though. I don't like that. That's not nice. Number 1. Terry McGinnis. When it comes to Batman, there are actually a lot of people who would be suited to don the cape and cowl, sometimes in his stead, and other times as those who would take up the mantle after he dies or he retires. In the case of Terry McGinnis, he was pretty much created to become the new Batman. Using Bruce's own DNA, Amanda Waller designed Terry as part of her project Batman Beyond. She basically overwrote the reproductive DNA of Terry's father and chose the McGinnis family to create the modern genetic Bruce Wayne duplicate, because their psychological profiles were close matches to Bruce's own parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, which means that, you know, when Terry grows up he should be like pretty much a perfect replica. Even more so if his parents had been assassinated like Amanda wanted, but didn't work out for Waller there. Probably for the best though. I don't think you should assassinate people's parents just to turn them into Batman. That seems pretty messed up, even for Amanda Waller. Number 10. Peter B. Parker. This alternate future version of Peter Parker hails from the Into the Spider-Verse multiverse. He is the older, mid-30s to approaching perhaps middle-aged Spider-Man, also known as Peter B. Parker, with the B in his name presumably standing for Benjamin, like the main continuity Peter of 616. In this reality, Peter is all grown up. He settles down with MJ only to later get divorced, as Mary Jane wanted kids but Peter wasn't ready. It's clear that this Peter Parker regrets some of his life choices, namely hurting MJ, and wants her back. He is pulled into Miles' reality thanks to Kingpin's Super Colliders experiments. Peter attempts to train Miles while also teaming up with him to defeat Kingpin and return both himself and the other alternate Spider folks back to their home realities before it's too late. Number 9. Officer Parker. In the alternate future of Earth X, Peter and Mary Jane's daughter May does not die and instead lives, growing up to become that reality's Venom. MJ dies of cancer before things start to get wild on Earth X, leaving Peter to take care of his daughter alone. Their relationship becomes strained as Peter doesn't believe that May can actually control the symbiote, when in reality she can. In this future, Peter's identity is also revealed to the public by Norman Osborn when he takes over the Daily Bugle, which also runs the paper out of business due to the revelation that the hero they called a supposed menace had been on their payroll the whole time. Eventually, Peter is convinced to join the New York police force by Luke Cage, and he works hard to protect the people of New York and later their scarce food supply, when the poles are reversed and New York freezes over as a result. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists about future alternate versions of Spidey, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Final Stand Spider-Man. Not all future Spider-Men finish life happy, and not all of them even are still considered heroes in the end. With Final Stand Spider-Man, the world is a lot more bleak in this future. This is an alternate future version of Peter Parker from a possible future that Madam Web gets a glimpse into. Here, Peter Parker ends up killing Kraven the Hunter and goes on to kill Dr. Octopus. He ends up betraying those he loves, and in the end, when the NYPD hunt him down, giving him an opportunity to surrender and admit to his crimes, Spider-Man refuses. He is shot and killed in this final stand. Number 7. Avengers Forever. This is actually a version of future Spider-Man often referred to as Spider-Man 2099. Not the Spider-Man 2099 though, as I said, this is an alternate version of that alternate version of Spider-Man. This Spider-Man 2099 is still Miguel O'Hara, but instead of hailing from the 2099 reality of Earth 928, this version of Miguel hails from the reality of Earth 98120, as seen in the 90s comic series Avengers Forever. In this alternate future, Miguel ends up joining the Avengers, but unfortunately later meets his end at the totemic life force draining hands of Morlun the Inheritor during the Spider-Verse event. Number 6. The CEO. As we said before, not all future versions of Spider-Man are heroes. Case in point, the Peter Parker who is still alive in 2099, as seen in the story from the 2011 video game, Spider-Man Edge of Time. Here, Peter Parker lives on to the year 2099 thanks to anti-aging tech. He fakes his own death as Spider-Man and operates in the shadows. shadows, becoming the CEO of the company Alchemex. He is one of the villains of the game who Spider-Man 2099 Miguel O'Hara must face in the end. Although Peter ends up a secret antagonist and villain, his goal at least is somewhat altruistic here. Peter wants to rewrite the timeline so that he can bring back all those that he's lost during his time as a hero. In the end, this Peter presumably gets erased from the time stream after a younger version of Peter Parker is convinced to not go down this path and never become the CEO of Alchemex. Number 5. Spider-Man 2211. Spider-Man 2211 is like Spider-Man 2099, but from even farther into the future. He is known as a time spinner and does his best to protect the time field. This version of Spider-Man is named Max Bourne, and his appearance also differs from the Spider-Man of Earth 616 and the Spider-Man of 2099 in the regard that his costume has multiple mechanized arms. Kinda like Dr. Octopus, or more specifically Dr. Octopus's look when he became Spider-Man and was known as Superior Spider-Man. Max Bourne's arch nemesis is Hobgoblin of 2211, who it turns out is actually his own daughter, Robin. Gasp. Along with Spider-Man of Earth 616 and Spider-Man of 2099, he faces and defeats Hobgoblin only for her true identity to be revealed to him. Number 4. Reign. Specifically, Spider-Man Reign. This future version of Spider-Man hails from an even bleaker reality than Final Stand Spider-Man, hailing from the comic known as Spider-Man Reign. Here, Peter ends up working at a flower shop after years of being a hero. No longer operating as Spider-Man, this version of Peter has become somewhat senile, frail, and old. He is also haunted by his past, having hallucinations of Mary Jane, who is now long dead. Mary Jane in this reality apparently died from being close to Peter, which he carries immense guilt over. Apparently his radioactiveness was not so good for MJ's body, ended up giving her cancer and sadly killed her in the end. Peter eventually does return to heroics, but even then it's a pretty sad return, with him mostly getting his butt whooped when he isn't busy being swept up in some kind of fantasy or hallucination of his past. Number 3. MC2. In the MC2 reality of Earth 982, Peter Parker actually gets to grow up and settle down with MJ. The two do end up married with kids, with daughter May, Mayday Parker, successfully being born. May grows up to have spider powers like her dad and eventually becomes known as the hero Spider-Girl, living up to her family legacy and becoming a hero in her own right herself. Peter and MJ in this reality also have another child, May's younger brother Benji. Benji as a youngster also displays abilities and powers. He also goes on to have an adventure as a little tyke with Carnage, unintentionally bonding with the symbiote. Fortunately, his older sister May is able to save him, although for a time Ben would actually suffer from permanent hearing loss as a result of that rescue. Number 2. Jerry Drew. In the same future that MC2 Peter hails from, known as the alternate reality of Earth 982, Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, also has a child. MC2 is notoriously known for being the reality where superheroes get to grow up, retire, or settle down to live a somewhat normal life, possibly amidst continued heroics for those, of course, who don't retire. As such, Jessica is also one of those heroes. She gets married and ends up pregnant, but unfortunately her son Jerry is born with a rare bloodborne illness. In an attempt to cure Jerry, Jessica submits him to the same experimentation which saved her as a child and also gave her spider powers. The same happens to Jerry, who also gets spider powers and ends up becoming a hero, taking up the mantle Spider-Man, after being inspired by stories that his mom tells him of her days as a hero and of Spider-Man's adventures. Number 1. Spider-Man 2099. What would a future Spider-Man list be without the future Spider-Man? That's right, we're talking about Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099. Or just Spider-Man really, as he's known in his own world, because it is 2099, so people don't just go like, hey, that's that hero 2099 and that's that villain 2099. 2099 is often thought of as being the future for the main comic book continuity of Earth 616. Here Miguel wasn't always actually the most altruistic guy, which I think is part of what makes him so cool as a character. He's got flaws. And becoming Spider-Man is part of his journey to becoming a better person. He becomes better as an individual as he becomes a hero. Miguel also comes with a futuristic look and some future tech as well. He got powers after submitting himself to his own experiments in the hopes of ridding himself of an addiction that was forced on him by the company he worked for, Alchemex, in order to prevent him from quitting. That's a pretty intense way to try to get someone to not quit. Be like, well, we create this substance and we're gonna give it to you without you knowing, and now you have an addiction to it, and now you have to keep working for us if you want that thing. So there you go. But thank goodness Miguel found a way around that.
At number 10 we have Weapon X Wolverine. First appearing in X-Men Alpha number 1, this version of Wolverine is missing one hand and fights in a Magneto-led version of the X-Men. It's hard to imagine Logan being even more grizzled than we're used to, but with face paint and a ton of built-up resentment about the whole missing hand situation, this version of the hero shows what age can do to a person, especially when you're creeping towards the ripe age of 300. Known as Weapon X in this future reality, this Wolverine soon becomes known as Weapon Omega, and to be fair, his anger isn't the only thing driving him to be more vicious than ever. This version of Wolverine is augmented by the Celestials and can only eventually be stopped by Jean Grey. At number 9 we have Counter-Earth Hawkeye. This could be contested whether or not he's from the future or just an alternate reality, but time is kinda hard to follow sometimes when dealing with interdimensional travel, so I'll leave this one up for debate. Regardless, it's a pretty unique version of Wolverine that I thought was worth mentioning. Franklin Richards writes a new version of Hawkeye in Onslaught Reborn number 1, who appears to be a different iteration than the one we're used to, and that's because behind the mask is actually Wolverine and not Clint Barton. On Counter-Earth, this version of Wolverine is part of the Avengers, and it seems to me that this alternate dimension is further along in its own timeline, allowing for Wolverine to possess some kind of magical ability brought on by Blastar the Living Bomb Burst. At number 8 is Phalanx Wolverine from the newer comic series X Deaths of Wolverine, released between January and March of 2022. This version of Wolverine travels into the future to save a being who is very important to the mutant race. And as he travels through time, he starts to envision memories from his past. Memories that he hadn't ever before been able to recall. One of the more significant of these lost memories is one where he was present during the birth of Charles Xavier, saving his family from Omega Red. This storyline uses a future version of Wolverine to remind us that this hero, being the most published in the history of Marvel Comics, has so much history that there is still new lore to be uncovered even in 2022. At number 7 we have Logan from Earth 10,511. Another iteration of Weapon X. This version of Wolverine appears in Wolverine Weapon X issue number 12 for just a brief moment. But in the short time that he appears, we get a glimpse into a whole new world where Wolverine has lost both his hands, replacing one of them with a hook. During a major battle in a distant future, he comes in to support his team with a big black beard and overgrown hair and a costume that seems entirely upgraded. He's got metal shoulder and chest pads with a utility belt, and he seems like, well, seems like he's been through a lot. He fights against Roxxon to take back the government, but is eventually, spoiler alert, killed by Deathlock. At number 6 we have James Howlett from Earth 96099. Only appearing very briefly, this future version of the hero is totally missing his arm after his battles with the Hulks, which seems like a theme, this whole no arm thing. But anyway, this time he's also totally bald as well. He decides to recruit a new X-Men team with a new race of mutants that he encounters in his future timeline. His goal is to rebuild Baltimore of all places after it is destroyed, along with much of civilization after a major war, but he also has to protect the world from an army of mindless Hulks who continue to act as the main threat in this storyline. At number 5 we have the Wolverine from Wolverine The End. This comic series is known to offer the reader a look into how these characters face, well, their ends. And in Wolverine's issues, we face what seems to be an even older and more grim version of an old man Logan. But for Wolverine, we're left with a cliffhanger instead of his death, suggesting that there will be even more future iterations of Logan and or James Howlett to come. In the final issue of this The End series, James faces off against his own older brother, John Howlett Jr. And as they duke it out in front of an audience of military personnel, James ends up accidentally killing his brother, driving his claws through his chest after a fall. After some epic final words are exchanged, we watch James sit in silence as it's suggested that he is apprehended by the authorities. But this isn't confirmed, that's actually where the series ends. This is definitely one of the more gothic and darker versions of Wolverine, and the dark epic storyline that this series explores really reflects how much Wolverine has been through over the years, even into the future. At number 4, we have Ultimate Cable. We all know that Cable is a time traveler and the son of Cyclops and Jean Grey. Well, on Earth 2107 this isn't the case. Instead, James Howlett takes on the mantle of Cable and sports a big scar across his face. This is from a battle taking place in the future where this Wolverine version of Cable, or vice versa, fights Apocalypse with the X-Men, and his arm is once again ripped off. When Apocalypse absorbs his healing factor, he uses the severed arm with the claws on it against Cable Wolverine and leaves a massive scar on the face. And since this and the dismemberment come after his healing power is taken away, these wounds remain. Luckily, this version of Wolverine has other abilities like Cable's and eventually finds a way to travel back in time 30 years to collect Professor X and try and right the wrongs of the future. At number 3 is Old Man Phoenix. First appearing in Marvel Legacy number 1, this version of Wolverine is, as you could imagine by the name, Old Man Logan possessing the Phoenix Force. Hailing from Earth 14412, this version of Logan basically mirrors that of 616 Logan, up until King Loki wipes out humankind. Logan is known to be dead under unknown circumstances, but is soon chosen to become the new host for the Phoenix Force and travels the universe destroying celestial bodies on his way. When he eventually encounters a future version of Loki, he goes back in time to undo the damage that Loki had done, letting go of the Phoenix Force in the process. And this is a request by Loki himself, after seeing something that changes his intentions for supreme power on a dime. This version of Wolverine is definitely the most powerful on the list, both in influence and sheer power. And he looks pretty badass as well, like an old angry wizard. Fire wizard. At number 2 we have Old Man Logan. Just good old man Logan. Everyone knows this one. I wanted to put him higher on the list than his Phoenix Force counterpart because even though the previous entry is more powerful, Old Man Logan is just more iconic. Old Man Logan first appears in Fantastic Four number 558, but is most well known for his own self-titled series. In this future, Logan has a family but is in constant fear for his life, as most of the world is ruled by supervillains. Most superheroes are dead this far into the future, and with his family on the line, he becomes a driven father and husband, packing a punch even more powerful now that it's driven by love and the fear that comes with it. After he raises enough money to protect his family from the Hulk gang, which is a thing in the future I guess, the gang kills his family anyway, leaving Old Man Logan with only one choice: to kill the original Hulk then and there. He is then integrated into the mainstream Marvel Universe after the events of Secret Wars. At number 1, we have the Days of Future Past Wolverine, or Wolverine from Earth 811. On Earth 811, this version of Wolverine lives in a time 33 years ahead of the modern 616 version. And when the Watcher from Earth 9997 looks into Logan's past, he unveils that Logan's past isn't quite as it seemed. Instead of being born sometime in the 1800s and tested on in a lab, X-51 finds that he had actually descended from a tribe of humans known as the Moon People. In this future storyline, he's faced with the task of protecting the mutant race after the Mutant Control Act is put into effect, and Sentinels are ordered as the protectors of America. After a few search and rescue missions, Wolverine joins the Resistance and fights with his mutant comrades, including Magneto, to defeat the Sentinels. In this reality, Wolverine has all the same powers as the 616 version, but he does have access to the Watcher's transportation devices as well on Earth's moon, which could transport him anywhere on Earth instantly. At number 10, we've got Punisher 2099. In the future, Jake Gallows takes on the mantle of Punisher, and he makes for a pretty impressive version of the anti-hero. Being a former member of the Church of Thor, he takes on a role as a sort of bodyguard for hire, while also functioning as a police officer under President Doom's regime. He's driven by vengeance after his mother, brother, and sister-in-law are all killed by Kron Stone, and eventually ends the man's murderous streak himself, which is a pretty impressive demonstration of his power on its own. This futuristic Punisher shows some really advanced fighting skill as well, and gains even better stats after he's given a bionic arm. He's also able to blend in very well due to a face scrambler he uses to avoid detection. At number 9, we have Captain America 2099, and I'll be focusing on Roberta Mendez since there are a few versions of the hero in this storyline. This version of Captain America is created by Alchemax, a corporation in the future that forces Roberta to take the super soldier serum and gain her powers. Roberta's Captain America becomes the leader of Alchemax's Avengers and has virtually the same abilities as the present day's Cap, although she naturally doesn't have as much experience as Steve Rogers due to her younger age. She also can't control when she turns into Captain America, only making the switch when she hears trigger words such as assemble to turn into Cap and dismissed to turn back to Roberta. But despite her shortcomings, she's still a really competent Captain America and ranks as one of the more powerful heroes from the future. At number 8, we have Bishop. Bishop is introduced in the Days of Future Past storyline as a member of the X-Men. In this futuristic world, Sentinels have enslaved Earth, and Bishop along with the rest of the X-Men make it their task to fight back. Well, okay, it's not really the X-Men, it's actually called Xavier's Security Enforcers and is known to be a futuristic organization which is kind of a successor to the X-Men. Anyway, most of Bishop's influence comes when he travels back in time and uses his foresight of the grim future to try and alter his timeline and stop the Sentinels from taking over. He has the impressive ability to absorb any energy around him, including light, magic, or psionic energy, and charge up his own attack, as well as a healing factor and naturally extremely efficient time travel. Much like Punisher 2099, Bishop also has a bionic arm which heightens his fighting and strength abilities. At number 7 is Iron Lad. Nathaniel Richards is a very powerful younger iteration of Iron Man from Earth 6311, and one of the biggest discrepancies between his suit and that of Earth 616, Tony Stark's, is that it allows him to travel through time. As the leader of the Young Avengers, Nate Richards isn't just some guy who gets his hand on an Iron Man suit, he's actually a teenage version of Kang the Conqueror, before his days as one of the most powerful villains in the game. Iron Lad has a pretty good power set as well, with neurokinetic armor which is made from a rare alloy from the 40th century. The armor actually listens to the wearer's subconscious thoughts and basically offers them superhuman abilities based on what they need in any given situation. Iron Lad also has a time-traveling spaceship which is pretty dang cool on its own and offers its own form of power to the futuristic hero. At number 6 is Hulk 2099. This version of the giant green beast shows similar abilities to the Hulk we know from the present, but instead of Bruce Banner, the conduit of the Hulk persona in this timeline is John Eisenhart. Eisenhart is a studio executive who studies the story of the original 616 Hulk, who by John's era has been dead for some time. During a conflict with a group of Hulk worshippers called the Knights of Banner, John is caught in a gamma bomb explosion and turned into the Hulk himself. Just like the present day Hulk, his skin is bulletproof, he naturally has a huge increase of strength in Hulk form, but the most impressive advantage this Hulk has over the original is that he keeps his full intelligence and personality while turned. Not only that, but John can transform into the Hulk at will. As we all know, this offers a huge boost of power, basically taking out the main drawback for the present day Earth 616 Hulk. At number 5, we have Impulse. Bart Allen is the grandson of the original Flash, Barry Allen, and he inherits all of his super speed abilities. But this futuristic speedster faces a challenge that his grandfather never had to, which is a sped up metabolism. This ages Bart Allen at an extreme speed, making him age to 12 years old while only being 2 years old chronologically. Luckily, Bart travels back in time, a trend I'm noticing with these futuristic heroes, and teams up with his cousin Wally West to normalize his metabolism. He then takes up the mantle of Impulse due to his impulsive personality and carries on a similar power set to any of the other Speed Force conduits, with super speed, accelerated healing, and electrokinesis. But Bart has some powers unique to him as well, like a photographic memory, increased hand-to-hand combat, and mechanical aptitude. At number 4, I'm putting Batman Beyond. The only character on this list who was first introduced in his own animated series outside of the comics, Batman Beyond is one of the longtime favorites of many Batman fans. This version of Batman hails from a cyberpunk future where he is portrayed as a younger Batman predecessor wearing an extremely advanced batsuit that offers the wearer superhuman abilities. He can see and hear through walls, has super strength, speed, and reflexes, and most impressively of all, Terry McGinnis's Batman can fly. Not glide, fly. But I'm sure you knew that already. With some fans online calling this Batman a mix between Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Batman, there's no question that this futuristic version of the hero we know and love deserves a spot on this list. At number 3, we have Spider-Man 2099. This version of Spider-Man is donned by Miguel O'Hara, who intentionally researches a way to turn himself into Spider-Man using technology and DNA enhancement. He succeeds and gains all the powers that present-day Spider-Man has, and more. This version of Spider-Man also gives gives himself a couple added bonuses of increased vision and hearing, as well as his signature talons and fangs that he gains through his genetic mutation. With these extra powers, there's no debating whether or not this futuristic version of the hero is more powerful than our present day Spider-Man. When he gets stuck in the present day, Spider-Man 2099 becomes one of the most powerful and coolest looking, in my opinion, superheroes in the world. This is one of the most impressive futuristic heroes to come out of the 2099 storyline, and he's probably the one who's lasted the longest so far as well. At number 2 is Thor 2099. In the future, there is an entire religion based on the mythos of the superhero and God of Thunder Thor. Similarly to the Hulk, who also has his own religion. I guess that's kind of a thing in the future. And Cecil McAdams is one of the priests at the Thorite Church who is chosen by the CEO of Alchemax to become one of the few people to be given the power of Thor himself. Not only this, but McAdams and the others who are part of this experiment are then brainwashed into thinking they're the real deal, making Cecil's drive and passion as the hero about as similar to the real thing as his powers are. But McAdams is the one out of all the test subjects who shines out of all of them and basically becomes a version of Thor that has the same power set as the modern day God of Thunder. And considering how powerful Thor is in the present day, there's no question that any hero from the future that carries the mantle would end up high on the list. At number 1, the final entry on our list is the most well-known time-traveling hero of them all, Cable. This guy deserves the top spot on the list because he is one of the most high-powered time-traveling heroes in any comic. There are definitely some OP time-traveling villains out there, but this guy takes the cake for the good guys. Son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, and Jean Grey, Cable has greatness and power in his genes. Transported to the future when he was just a baby, Cable goes through a series of hardships in what is known to be a pretty bleak future, and returns to the present infected with a techno-organic virus. This virus turns him into a cyborg-like being that has increased strength on top of his already formidable telepathic and telekinetic abilities. With such a dynamic power set, and I didn't even touch on most of it to keep this video short, Cable is the perfect hero to have leading the charge for a better future. He is often in positions of leadership given his foresight into the future and his time-traveling abilities, and often leads some of the present day's most influential and powerful heroes into battle. He is usually seen as a prophet who takes on the impossible task of changing the outcome of the future for the better of humankind. And with everything he brings to the table, he has to be considered one of the most powerful and impressive superheroes to ever come from the future. At number 10 is Klitzplik. Just put the name up on the screen, please, because I can't pronounce that. This guy, believe it or not, is actually a descendant of Kal-El. This weird little dude hails from far in the future, around the 67th century to be more specific, but he is immortal, so he's also encountered as far into the future as the 853rd century. He is also known to be a fifth dimensional being, which means that he can explore dimensions beyond the understanding of any normal humans, including myself. I don't get it. And I'm not alone. Most heroes wouldn't even understand it either. He has all the classic Kryptonian powers, but due to his bloodline including genes from a whole other race of superpowered beings, this future version of Superman also has 5D vision, which means that he can share his thoughts with others in real time, among other things. And he uses a weapon called the Hyperpoon, which is a hilarious name for a weapon that functions beyond the means of our comprehension. It's basically just more 5D stuff. At number 9 is Super Batman. Not much is known about this guy other than that he was at one point part of the Superman squad. He is known as a mixture of two different heroic traditions, having descended from both the Superman and Batman families. Of course, he wears a uniform that marries the designs of both Batman and Superman costumes, and seems to have a combination of the two heroes' strengths as well. Sometime in the future, this guy is formed, and even though there's little known about him, I put him on the list because a hybrid of Superman and Batman must be pretty powerful to some crazy degree we would never understand. At number 8 is Superman Secundus. In the DC 1 million timeline, Superman Secundus is explained to be Superman Prime's direct heir, having founded the Superman dynasty and successfully fighting off the Tyrant's son, as well as Solaris, among others. Then in All-Star Superman, another future Superman named Superman 2 appears, who seems to just be the same version of the hero as Superman Secundus, just in a different iteration. This future stuff gets a little bit complicated, but this future Superman seems pretty powerful, and since he's known to be the son of Superman Prime, I felt I just needed to throw him on the list. At number 7, we've got Connor Kent, or FKA Superboy. This future version of Superman is pretty unique in that he's actually a clone of both Superman and Lex Luthor. He spends his youth in fear that he'll turn out more like Lex Luthor in all the worst ways, and unfortunately that's actually what happens. As Connor grows up into a more mature hero, he gains a reputation as a brutal version of Superman who uses extreme force against his enemies with little to no remorse. But later on during the Infinite Crisis storyline, we learn that this future Connor Kent is actually a clone of an early version of himself, which is a relief to him, but doesn't make much sense. Does it make sense? I don't know. Anyway, he's not Lex Luthor, at least. At number 6, we have Adam Ken plus 477 SPMN. The future is horrible at coming up with names apparently, but anyway, this future version of Superman is pretty cool because he kind of comes across as so futuristic that he's actually a much more complex being, but also a sort of simpler and stripped down being than Superman is now in a weird way, which is how it seems like the future would actually be if you went forward far enough. In Superman number 400, we see a future where Superman has died and his descendants have reproduced with humans, creating a new type of super being. But when they accidentally create a massive vortex in space, one of their leaders, Adam Ken, elects himself to plug it while the rest of them turn themselves into energy for some reason, to protect themselves. Anyway, the plan works and the vortex is mended, leaving only Adam Ken, we'll just call him Adam, leaving Adam as the only living being in the universe. So he thinks, until he meets his Eve. At number 5, we have the DCAU Superman from Batman Beyond. Only aging slightly, leaving some gray in his hair, this version of Kal-El is actually turned evil by Starro the Conqueror, who influences his actions over time to fit his evil agenda. But before this is found out, Superman leads the Justice League Unlimited for a while into the future, even inviting Terry McGinnis, aka Batman Beyond, into the League. It's good he does this too, because Batman becomes the one who frees Superman from Starro's grasp down the line. This version of Superman is a more experienced and stronger hero, and although he's tricked by a villain into doing some evil deeds, this isn't a list ranking power or wit. This version of Superman is just one of the more well-known and respected, and I figured he at least had to go in the top 5. At number 4 is Jordan Elliott. This is one of my personal favorites of these future versions of Superman because it's a rare example of a future Kal-El hanging up the mantle of Superman and actually living the existence of a mortal man, which I think is a pretty cool glimpse into the character and how he would act if his life were simple and much less influential. His motivation to do this is that he actually ends up killing Mr. Muxiez-Putluk, which thank goodness, so I don't have to say the guy's name anymore. Who he kills after the annoying little dude lays out a number of bad things to happen in Superman's life. In a fit of shame, Superman voluntarily walks into a room containing gold kryptonite, which strips him of his powers permanently. He then takes on the name of Jordan Elliott after his father Jor-El, and marries Lois Lane in anonymity. And honestly, I'm happy for the dude, because we don't have to deal with that little Mixie-esta-plick guy anymore, right? And also, Superman's done enough. At number 3 is the Superman from the Dark Knight Returns storyline. One of the most iconic storylines involving both Superman and Batman takes place in a future where the government, aka Lex Luthor and Brainiac, has control over him, and they force Superman to carry out missions for them as a kind of superpowered contractor. A brainwashed superpowered contractor, that is. Seeing this from afar, Bruce Wayne decides he has to venture into the dangerous territory of mortal versus alien combat, taking on Superman 1v1. Luckily, Clark Kent comes back from his brainwashing, but only after a huge battle between the two former friends. At number 2 is the Superman from the Kingdom Come storyline. This iconic future version of Superman has to come out of retirement to protect the human race against a new, misguided group of younger super beings. A more grizzled, aged, and wise Superman, the Kingdom Come storyline brings a ton of humanity to the character as he faces the challenge of humbling himself and his allies in their older age. After a murderous superhero named Magog is acquitted of killing the Joker, Superman goes into hiding for 10 years, leaving Kansas to be overrun by a community of misguided superpowered beings. Having also lost Lois Lane, Superman becomes jaded, but ultimately comes out of hiding to reform the Justice League. On top of reforming a younger generation of misguided heroes though, and well, a brainwashed Captain Marvel, which adds a huge rut in the whole works, they have to also prevent the humans from dropping 3 massive nuclear bombs on Kansas, which are also superpowered to affect superpowered beings more than they originally would. This version of Superman shows a side to the hero that we are not used to, giving him a wiser, more jaded disposition. It really proves that doing the right thing is just in Kal-El's blood, no matter how much the world has betrayed him. At number 1 is Superman Prime. This has got to be the most powerful and iconic futuristic version of Superman from the comics, and don't get this mixed up with Superboy Prime either, that's a whole other guy. Superman Prime appears in the DC 1 million series and sets out at the end of the 21st century to explore the cosmos. He then returns briefly in the 700th century, that's roughly 70,000 years later, and spends his time in his new Fortress of Solitude, which is the sun. Finally, another 10,500 years later in the 853rd century, he comes back again, this time with a totally golden makeover, and creates a new Lois Lane from scratch along with some other key players from his old life. This version of Superman is just completely overpowered and more of a god than many other iterations of the hero, giving us a glimpse into the vast expanse and possibility of a distant future for Superman.
And at 10, Spider-Man Reign. I love talking about Spider-Man Reign because honestly, it's pretty damn ridiculous. Spider-Man Reign was Marvel's counter to the Dark Knight Returns storyline from DC. Set 30 years in the future, Peter has retired and Mary Jane is dead. The mayor of New York has taken control of the cities in more ways than just being the mayor, and when JJJ gets Spider-Man back, the mayor releases the Sinister Six from prison, including versions of Electro, Mysterio, Kraven, Sandman, Scorpion, and Hydro Man, as well as a dead Doc Ock tentacle who saves Peter's life after his mask was ripped off in front of a crowd. Doc Ock's final command to his tentacles was to show Peter 3 grave markers, those of Mary Jane, May Parker, and Ben Parker. After being buried in Mary Jane's coffin by Octopus's tentacle and coming face to face with and conquering his inner demons, Peter emerges in his famous red and blue suit, which he had secretly buried with her. Cause yeah. It's also revealed that the mayor, Edward Sachs, is actually Venom, who plans to turn all of New York into an army of symbiotes. But the worst part is when it's revealed that MJ died because of Peter's radioactive swimmers. I guess having a kid with a superhero is a kinda risky business. Give me that episode of Sex Sent Me to the ER. Oh man. And at 9, The Dark Knight Returns. As you can expect when Batman has to, return, Batman was retired and Gotham City had become a haven for all sorts of violent gangs. But before you can say why so serious, the man is back in action and gets yet another new Robin to help clean up the streets of his city. But I know what you're thinking. Batman cannot be street sweeper certified, and you're probably right, but what I mean is he's back to fighting crime. But of course, no alternate universe dystopian Batman story would be complete without a take on the Joker, who still represents the same anarchy threatening to destroy society. I think he's trying to fix it. On the other side though is Superman, a tool of the authoritarian government who wants Batman out of the picture. And as always, it's up to Bruce to find the perfect balance between law and order. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. I love when the superheroes are old though and still try to fight crime. Like I just picture my great grandfather like trying to kick like some thug who's like at his nursing home trying to take his shampoo. Just, yeah, that's what I imagine. And at 8, The Ray. Set on an Earth where Germany won World War II, it can make things pretty clear when you're talking about a dystopia. The Ray is a member of the resistance fighting against the German soldiers and is the primary protagonist of Freedom Fighters The Ray, which is an animated series set in the Arrowverse. The Ray in the crossover at least is shown to be quite powerful, being able to take down Red Tornado from what I can remember. This dude also has like a really cool suit and in the show is either married to or dating Captain Cold, which is sweet. He gained his powers after the original Ray died in front of him, and he was also included in the comic adaptation adaptation of the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which was already adapted from the original comic event, but this one is based off the CW with Felicity and other people. However, the Ray was destroyed along with his Earth in the TV version of the crossover, but in the comics he was killed along with Felicity and Nyssa. This guy has some mad superpowers though, like super strength, flight, light energy blasts, light speed, invisibility, photokinesis allowing him to make solid light constructs, bioluminescence, and that's not even the whole list. Okay, it's freaking nuts, man. And at 7, Zombie Hulk. Marvel Zombies is probably one of the most accessible alternate futures in Marvel Comics, according to multiple people. And I don't think that we need much of an explanation here as to why Zombie Hulk would be scary powerful. Hulk is already a brute with anger issues, but this story takes place in an alternate version of the Marvel Universe called Earth 2149, where all superpowered beings became infected by an extraterrestrial virus which transformed them into zombies. So the Hulk, who already had a passion for smashing, is now hungry for human flesh. Do you see where I'm going with this? On the wiki, his abilities are listed as genius level intellect, superhuman strength, superhuman speed, master combatant, and cosmic powers from when he ate the Silver Surfer and Galactus. But his hobbies also include devouring living flesh, which sounds like the worst dating profile ever, or the best. They even have a section for crimes he's committed, like genocide, cannibalism, and more. I wish they had that section on Tinder. That'd make things interesting. And at 6, Injustice Flash. But what about a world where Superman was tricked into killing Lois Lane and his unborn son by the Joker, who made him hallucinate fighting Doomsday, but then also nukes Metropolis? That's a thing that happened and it was absolutely brutal. So Superman ends up killing the Joker and then gets a taste for it, basically becoming a dictator of the world and then turning it into a dystopia where his word is law. Batman, among others, obviously fight it, but one of the superheroes who joins Superman is actually the Flash, who is still super fast, but now he works for a totalitarian regime. He does end up defecting, but let's be honest, he's more powerful when he's working with Superman because everyone ends up fearing him. He could shove a vibrating hand through your chest faster than you could say your own name. Just the thought of Superman having a speedster in his corner is enough to make your spine shiver. Halfway through and at number 5, Captain America 3099. Being used as a skin in the game Marvel Future Fight, Captain America 3099 is in essence Captain America, but make it RoboCop. He has a holographic shield that still actually works like a shield, but is probably one of the coolest and weirdest versions of Captain America I've ever seen. It looks really sweet, and I'd love to see someone cosplay this. Like maybe I'll be able to like grab a piece of like acrylic or something and make the shield myself, because like you can put the LEDs and stuff. It's dope. But he is, after all, the same old Captain America. So pretty powerful, but not as powerful as some other heroes. But I'm actually serious though, someone needs to make this shield. Whether it's the Hacksmith or Odin makes or something, I'd make this shield, okay? I will happily do my best to get the rest of the costume together, because this is like my next goal. And at 4, Old Man Logan. The dystopia in Old Man Logan is about as screwed up as it gets. It was, after all, the inspiration behind the Logan movie, if you didn't already know. The original comic run of this story was all about Logan and a blind Hawkeye traveling across a country that had been completely conquered by supervillains. Those villains included the Abomination, Magneto, Doctor Doom, and Red Skull. The other villains that appear also include a venomized T-Rex. No, I'm not kidding. And the Hulk Gang, which is a whole other can of worms I don't really want to get into. Eventually though, Hulk and Logan have one final face-off, toe-to-toe, shot for shot, and Logan ends up decapitating the Hulk and then is on his way, finding a new sense of purpose, wanting to take the country back from the supervillains who took control, which is a noble yet probably lost cause, because let's be honest, would he really have won in that scenario? I don't think so. And at 3, Maestro. Speaking of the Hulk, Maestro from the Future Imperfect storyline is actually the version of Hulk present in the Old Man Logan series. First appearing in the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect #1 from 1992, Maestro possesses Bruce Banner's intelligence and the Hulk's more malevolent personality traits. After a devastating nuclear war destroyed most of the human race, the radiation from the war ended up basically supercharging the Hulk, turning him into an even more powerful version. He then ended up violently interacting with his cousin, She-Hulk, which resulted in the birth of the Hulk Gang. Yeah, I know I said I didn't want to get into it, but at this point I kind of have to explain this. This is absolutely terrifying, because while Hulk is already a freaking monster, add more radiation, more power, and the destruction of a whole country, and Bruce Banner's intelligence, there's certainly something to be scared of. Not only that, but this was in 1992. They ran this story along with the whole Hulk Gang thing in 1992. Nobody would do this now, let alone 1992. It just seems like that's insane to me. Penultimately, in at number 2, Kingdom Come Superman. Yet another world where Lois Lane dies, except this time it's directly at the hands of the Joker, who had flooded the Daily Planet with his own toxin, killing everyone but Lois, who had managed to locate a gas mask. However, she tried to attack the Joker, but then Joker cracks her skull. Superman returns and Lois succumbs to her injuries and dies. As the Joker arrives for his trial though, he's killed by a new superhero called Magog. But then, Magog ends up being acquitted of his charges, which just makes Superman appalled, because, you know, the public is embracing a killer. But I mean, like, let's be honest, they do that anyway. Already disheartened by the death of Lois Lane, Kal-El abandons his life as Superman and retreats to the Fortress of Solitude, where he spends the next decade. Superman eventually returns to reform the Justice League with the goal of capturing heroes who followed Magog's example and took to killing, which results in many a battle and a nuke targeted towards metahuman genes. But in the end, Superman starts dating Wonder Woman and they end up expecting a child. Hopefully Joker doesn't make you think you're fighting Doomsday. Finally, in at number 1, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is considered the most powerful superhero in comics because he possesses basically unlimited powers. He debuted in the graphic novel limited series of Watchmen, published in 1986 and 1987, but Manhattan later on became a major player in the DC universe. He was revealed to be responsible for the Flashpoint event, which ended up creating the New 52 timeline in the process, something that removed 10 years of history of DC characters, and he did it on his own. So how could I not include Dr. Manhattan on this list when the Watchmen comic is very dystopian? The dystopia in Watchmen is caused by superheroes who thought that they could save the world but ended up leaving it hollow and broken. And Ozymandias makes another dystopia on top of that, thanks to him thinking that the only way to fix the world would be to destroy it. I still don't get this thought process, but I also totally get this thought process. Like, thinking that the world needs a reset, I understand, but actually trying to reset it is something else entirely.
Number 10. Cable. Cable is not only dangerous to others he comes up against as a hero, but he's even dangerous to himself. Cable is a badass from the future who is taken there in his youth to protect him and ensure his survival. He has since made his way all across and through time, and has even returned to the present from the future, which is his past. Yeah, it's a lot of time travel stuff. It can get a little confusing. When Cable dies, it isn't even because anyone else took him out either, and he even saw it coming, because it turns out that his younger self was the one responsible, a version of the character we often refer to as young Cable or Kid Cable. So yeah, Cable is deadly in the sense that he'll do whatever he needs to, even if it means ending his own time loop by killing his older self. Does that make sense? I hope what I said just made sense. I think it made sense. Number 9. Old Woman Laura. X-23's future self ends up in a much nicer alternate future reality than her genetic father Wolverine. Old Man Logan's reality? Wasteland, lots of death, and people who have gone insane. Cannibalism. Old Woman Laura's reality? A sort of futuristic paradise where Kamala Khan ends up as president. But even still, her future isn't perfect, because Laura is dying. Her genes have become unstable in her old age due to a flaw in the cloning process that made her. Not so good. The other thing that's not so good? Doom is holding the people of Latveria hostage, and it's up to Laura to put a stop to it. This version of Laura from the future is just as deadly as her main continuity counterpart, but with added years of experience, and is willing to do whatever it takes to defeat Doom, even if it means killing him and possibly sacrificing herself to do it. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love time traveling as much as I love time traveling, click that like. Every time you click that like, there's a chance you could go back in time. That's not true, but wouldn't it be cool if when you clicked like on videos, you could time travel? That would be pretty cool. Number 8, Old Man Logan. Old Man Logan stays a hero in the future, but only because he doesn't have much other choice, really. Really, all Logan wants to do is live his life without having to think too much of all the deaths of his friends that he's responsible for. Logan in the alternate future of Earth 807128 ends up killing all of his fellow X-Men after being tricked into thinking they were all villains by Mysterio. Not only was he capable of causing all of that death, but further into the future, he goes up against a powerful and horrific villain in his time and reality, facing the head of the Hulk gang and also sort of his landlord, Pappy Banner, aka Old Man Hulk. Something went wrong with Bruce Banner as time went on in this reality, and he basically lost his mind, likely as a result of that gamma radiation affecting him well into his elder years, and not in a good way. Logan ends up being swallowed whole by Hulk, but defeats him in the end by cutting his way out of Old Man Hulk's gut. It's pretty gross. Number 7. Green Lantern. Jessica Cruz from our time might not be quite so dangerous yet, but when we glimpsed into her possible future in the Future State line from DC, we learned that there is a future version of her who becomes a Yellow Lantern, joining the Sinestro Corps. Not all Yellow Lanterns are bad, but because they are generally about instilling fear in others, they more often than not tend to end up becoming deadly supervillains. And that's usually who they are. Jessica Cruz found herself stranded on a Green Lantern base and outpost without her powers, and when Sinestro Corps members showed up to investigate, found herself offered a Yellow Lantern ring after her fight against them had resulted in her overcoming her own fears and instilling fear into the hearts of her enemies. Which I'm not gonna lie, I really like that twist in the future for Jessica. I think Jessica as a Yellow Lantern is really cool. Number 6. The Fallen One. The Fallen One is a version of Norrin Radd who comes from a very dark future where Thanos wins. He first appeared in issue 15 of Thanos from 2016 in the Thanos Wins storyline. While he is pretty swiftly defeated, it is only because those he goes up against are even more deadly than him. And even then, it takes a few issues before the fight against him is actually concluded. So it's not like you're in, you're out. It's not a one and done. It's a few issues. Norrin Radd, aka the Silver Surfer, became the Fallen One after he was imbued with black matter and also boasts, of course, of the power cosmic, in addition to wielding Thor's hammer Mjolnir. He also comes leading the charge of the Annihilation Wave, so he's got a lot going on. He got all this power in the hopes of standing a chance in the final showdown with Thanos, as one of the last beings left alive in the universe, one of the final people to actually fight him. Sadly, he does fail, but he still manages to look deadly and badass while doing so. So you gotta give him some points for that. Number 5. Superman. John Kent in Future State takes up the mantle of Superman after his father. This also happens after his father left Earth, and many of those who he helped believe that he actually has gone missing, possibly to never return. That's what people think is going on with OG Superman. Well, we skip through the future timeline and Future State with this version of John from this future being shown as a very heroic character. We also see some things that he does in this futuristic timeline that seem, well, not so heroic. Like when he bottled the city of Metropolis. John believed he had no other choice and that this was kind of the most peaceful solution to fixing the problems that the city faced at the time. However, he later is forced to confront the fact that he took away the freedom of the people of Metropolis when he made this choice for them. Future State John Kent is dangerous because he is willing to do whatever it takes to protect the city of Metropolis, which sometimes means taking actions that other heroes like Supergirl find questionable. Number 4. King Thor. King Thor might be one of the most powerful future heroes on this list, but he also is only so deadly and dangerous because he's living in a time where he has to be. King Thor is the alternate future version of Thor from the alternate Earth of 14412. Here Thor goes on to become the Allfather and lives beyond the point where Midgard becomes a lifeless husk as a result of Thor's once more again villainous brother Loki, the god of mischief. At one point while battling Doom in the future, King Thor is granted the Phoenix Force by Logan, who is currently bonded to it at that time, and is able to use that power to defeat Doom. Considering that King Thor will do whatever it takes to defeat those who would oppose him, and considering how much power he wields, even when he doesn't have the Phoenix Force, I'd say he's a pretty dangerous future hero. I wouldn't want to go up against him. Number 3, Cosmic Ghost Rider. I would say Cosmic Ghost Rider is one of the most dangerous heroes on this list because he's not entirely mentally stable, which also makes him a lot more unpredictable. Cosmic Ghost Rider was originally Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. When Thanos attacked Earth, Frank made a deal with Mephisto, following his death, to become a spirit of vengeance, a Ghost Rider, so that he could return to Earth and get revenge on Thanos for all of the people on Earth that he had killed. However, by the time Frank returned to Earth, there was basically nothing left to avenge, and Thanos had already left, leaving the planet empty and desolate. Frank wandered as a Ghost Rider for years, and in his solitude, lost his mind. He would go on to become a Herald of Galactus in an attempt to defeat Thanos, but would eventually submit to being Thanos' Herald after realizing that fighting against him was pretty pointless. Number 2, Booster Gold. Booster Gold is demonstrably dangerous as a hero from the future, mainly because he has no idea what he's doing. He has tons of knowledge of what is meant to happen in the main continuity and present day that he traveled to from the future, but he has no idea of how messing with the past timeline or anything like that could affect the present day or its future. We see how dangerous he can be when he attempts to even do good, like saving Bruce's parents in the past so that they can be there for his wedding. Unfortunately, in doing so, completely messes with the timeline to the point that Booster is actually forced to travel back in time and make sure that Bruce's parents are killed and that poor young Bruce is basically there to witness their deaths. It's also kind of implied that Booster being there and fixing all of that is actually what caused their deaths. It's pretty crazy, it's pretty trippy. Booster might have some valuable knowledge as someone from the future, but he doesn't have the finesse needed to know when the timeline can be tweaked and when it should be left alone to avoid catastrophes from manifesting in the future. Basically, do not let Booster time travel and mess with the timeline. It is not a good idea. Number 1, Iron Lad. Iron Lad is not specifically from the future, but he does go on to become a very dangerous villain who returns from the future. Iron Lad, who was a member of the Young Avengers, it turns out is actually destined to become Kang the Conqueror, who has many different villainous personas throughout the years. I won't go into them right now, but you know some of them. And he's also known for his time travel antics. He often travels back through to the past from the future to enact all kinds of elaborate plots. As a Mortis, he had a hand in creating White Vision. Kang also at one point turns Iron Man evil, brainwashing him into becoming his loyal servant and villainous right-hand man. He's basically behind a lot of evil things that you're like, what is even happening here? And then it'll be like, haha, it was Kang the whole time. Possibly what we'll see in the MCU. I'm placing my bets. Because sadly, I don't think I'm getting Norman Osborn in this phase. Number 10, Death of Dee Dee. In the Future State glimpse into Gotham City Sirens, we are introduced to a new member of the team in issue number 1 of the next Batman. For those who are unaware, actually, there are a slew of amazing extra stories that come in this comic, and pretty much all of them are good. While I would say that Gotham City Sirens is maybe the weakest of these, it's still a really good story, so that's not even like an insult to it. But there is a very tragic and heart-wrenching moment that might also infuriate you in this story. The newest member of the team is Dee Dee, an AI droid who was made in the future by a very shady businessman. Exposing Dee Dee's creator for his problematic practices could topple the magistrate's reign, so Catwoman and Poison Ivy bring her into the fold and team up with the AI, and they have like an awesome girls' night out, which is the whole plot, but anyways. However, after we get to know and love Dee Dee on this girls' night out, it's revealed that she is not destined to stay with the group, and in the end, she sacrifices herself to help Gotham and her new friends. Hopefully, if we get some future Gotham City Sirens stories, DC can somehow find a way to feature Dee Dee in those stories, like working alongside the team again. Or maybe if we go past this future, they'll be able to bring her back with her memory. Otherwise, I feel like I was duped into loving a neat new character who I'll just never see again. I hate that. I hate when people are like, look at this cool new character, and you're like, oh, is this gonna be oh, no, they're dead. Okay, never mind. Cool. Number 9, Bat-Cat reunited? How could this be a worse thing? I know you're thinking. Wouldn't that be good, Amanda? Well, because these two, it seems, were only brought back together to be ripped asunder once more. How tragic. My heart. Catwoman tells a story of Selina trying to pull off a train heist where she is looking to free the magistrate's captured criminals. In issue 1, while she found Automatopoeia, it was revealed that Talia al Ghul, also on the train, found Bruce Wayne. In issue number 2, Bruce manages to see that Selina is on the train via a monitor in security. Not only does he show up to help save the day, but then he and Selina also have a touching reunion. Always hair in my mouth. Honestly, if you're a fan of the Bat-Cat relationship, issue 2 of Catwoman is for you. You need to read it. There are a lot of great moments exploring what Bruce means to Selina. Despite being reunited, ultimately, Batman decides to split from Catwoman, knowing if they stay together, she'll forever be on the run and in danger. Even more so than usual, I guess. Can't you just be on the run together? Why you gotta split up? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, just a reminder, if you are enjoying DC Future State as much as us, or you know, even if you're not enjoying it, give this video a thumbs up. We really love talking about it with you, and yeah, it also lets us know that you like when we talk about events and event adjacent things. Number 8, the question is, I hope you've clicked ahead if you didn't want this revealed, by the way, because I'm about to reveal who the question is. The question is... Dead Man? Wait, what? I don't think this is actually the worst of the worst things to happen, but I just felt that it was kind of random. I mean, maybe there were clues and I missed them in Shazam issue 1 to lead me to this revelation. And if you loved this reveal, feel free to let me know in the comments below if you disagree with me, because, hey, you know, I didn't hate it, I just didn't love it, and I would love to hear about why people love it. In Shazam issue number 2, we learn of the Question's true identity after it's already been established previously in Shazam that the identity of the Question is a complete mystery. Ooh, we don't know who it is, who will it be? Which is usually a good time. I personally think I like when the Question is super mysterious and we actually don't know who it is. I don't need a reveal. In fact, I would have even been cool for this to not be revealed in Future State. The true identity of the Question could then be kept a mystery and it could unfold in maybe a new Question series. I don't know. But hey, that's just me. Number 7, Billy gives up his life. In Shazam issue number 1, we learn of what happened to Shazam following him leaving the Teen Titans. He appears to have somehow gotten out of the Rock of Eternity, but Raven is nowhere to be seen. So, what happened? Well, it turns out Shazam made a deal to get free and act as a hero on Earth, while Billy took his place as guard in the Rock of Eternity, having the spirit that was needed to do so, because it's Billy Batson. What does this mean? Billy basically gave up his whole life to protect the world, acting as a guardian, while Shazam lives on Earth as a hero in this place. Now, I put hero in quotes because, well, Shazam doesn't really end up acting so heroic without Billy there to kind of guide him. But that's a whole other story. I could do a whole separate point on that. Well, it's later revealed Billy doesn't end up stuck there forever. He was still there for who knows how long, and him even agreeing to act as guardian without Shazam, it turns out was an all-around really bad move. We're better together. They're not so good if you separate them. Yikes. Number 6, Teen Titans Academy. So, we've got some good news and we got some bad news here. The Teen Titans come together in this possible future to start their own academy to train young heroes and even recruit some of the other non-Titans DC heroes as faculty. Yay! And guess what? We will actually get to explore this future as a reality in the Teen Titans Academy comic series. Bad news? Oh yeah, the bad news. The Academy gets blown apart and tons of their superhero students and staff die during its destruction. Yikes. That's how we set the scene for Future State Teen Titans issue number 1. One of the bleakest states of all the series to come about so far, in my opinion. One of being the keywords there. Number 5, Jace's missing backstory. This is something that has bothered me less as we've got to know Jace, aka Tim Fox, Luke's brother, aka Batman right now, but I also feel like it would have helped a lot of people get on board with our next Batman earlier on in his series if we had sort of found out more, because Jace is a lesser known character who has a history that in this continuity is almost like unwritten. It's hard for us as readers to connect with who he is as a character. There are little details you can pick up about him as you read, like in Justice League when we learned that he likes to hum his own little soundtrack to himself while fighting, which I loved as a little tidbit, but you really need to dig or just be paying close attention to get those details. After all, that detail didn't even come from his own book, but from a team book that he is featured in, right? I just want to know more about what being Batman means to Jace, why it's important, and I would love some more hints as to how it kind of all came about. But now, the next Batman is done, so I guess hopefully we'll get more of it in another book and we'll get to see more of Jace's Batman, because I did like it. I was just like, give me some reasons that I can, you know, get really connected to the character and like love who they are as a person outside of the persona. Number 4, Amanda Waller's plan. This is a big yikes for me, friends. In Future State Suicide Squad, we're introduced to a whole new squad that seems to be impersonating established heroes, or taking on the role of those mantles legitimately, but not necessarily of their own volition. This is simply because they are a part of Amanda Waller's new version of the Suicide Squad, the Justice Squad. Although a lot of them do actually want to like redeem themselves and be good people. And then there is one exception, actually, Connor Kent, who seems to be super interested in embodying his role as Waller's Superman. We also find out that the Squad are attempting to help Waller in some kind of mysterious mission that she is on. Considering her plan B is to bring back the crime syndicate using the Black Lantern ring, the mission Project Home Base is probably one of the worst ones she has come up with yet, because that's her plan B. To be like, oh, I'll just bring back the crime syndicate and make them do this. Regardless, our heroes, the Justice Squad, have no choice but to follow her lead, die trying or die refusing. Number 3, Wally becomes Famine. If you've been watching our coverage of DC Future State over here, you probably guessed we were going to go to this point. Why is Wally becoming one of the 4 horsemen one of the worst things, you might be wondering? Well, because it's the opposite of what Wally West fans want. People who love Wally West love him because he's just such a good guy. We love Wally for Wally, and the last big events featuring him prominently when he finally did return to us feel like they have been moving him further and further away from the person we all love. Future State was supposed to be a chance to challenge the status quo, and making Wally a villain again, albeit a very remorseful one on the inside from what I've seen, just isn't actually doing that for the character. You're not reinventing him. We've already done that. Personally, I feel like bringing back the whole West family somehow in Future State would be really cool, or just do something completely new with him. Villainous Wally has been done, and a lot of people were not feeling it when it did happen, and so they still aren't. Family Man Wally, that's what I want. Number 2, the timeline. One of the worst things to happen in Future State for most people is this wacky timeline we were thrown into. Nothing is happening in order, and it's kind of hard to tell where in the timeline of Future State you are when you're reading something. I personally find this to be like a kind of fun mystery. I like to piece it together myself, but for many other readers, they find it weird and confusing. And I get that. There is also the problem of the more Future State you read, the more you kind of get the big picture of what's going on in this reality. But if you want to try and understand that without reading everything, good luck to you, because you kind of got to read everything to get the bigger picture. For some, this makes the pseudo event more enjoyable, but for others, not so much. Fortunately, there are some resources out there online if you do need to know the order of everything. But the other worst thing to happen, or not happened really, with Future State is that we likely won't know what's being kept as continuity till after the event is done. That's the tricky part of glimpsing into possible futures. Some of them will also become impossible in our current continuity, depending on which path we go down, which also might muddy up the timeline in the long run. Number 1, Raven is free. If you've been following Future State, especially the Teen Titans stuff, you'll know how awful this is. For some context, we learn in Teen Titans Future State issue 2 that Raven ends up defeating the 4 Horsemen, one of the biggest bads of the Future State timeline, it would seem, so far anyways. But we also learn that in order to do so, she had to take those entities within herself, meaning that she is now one of the most evil and dangerous beings on the planet. Fortunately, Shazam had a solution, and he ends up taking her to the Rock of Eternity and plans on basically staying there forever in his Shazam form to guard Raven. But, and yes, there's a big but coming, in issue 2 of Shazam, we discover that Necron managed to devise a plot to basically get Raven freed, which honestly means that one of the worst threats we've seen this whole event is now going to be coming to Earth. So everyone better watch out. What do you think have been some of the worst moments in DC Future State? And what awful happenings have left you shook? Let us know in the comments below. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, saying thank you so much for watching and reminding you to stay nerdy, YouTube.